Let's get more now on our top story and that High Court ruling expected this morning, which could see a group of asylum seekers, including children, deported to Nauru. The Greens immigration spokeswoman Sarah Hanson-Young joins us now from Parliament House. Senator, good morning to you.
Good morning, Michael.
Firstly, as you know, the ABC reported last night that in this group of children potentially going back to Nauru was a 5-year-old boy who was allegedly raped in the Pacific nation. What was your response to that story?
Look, it really highlighted the horrors and the trauma that many of these children are suffering as a result of their time on Nauru. Of course, we know that, unfortunately, this young boy is not the only one who has been subjected to sexual assault, abuse, and many young women, of course, have also been subjected to rape. And sadly, many of these children at the hands of people who have been employed in the vicinity of the detention centre. It is overwhelmingly a dangerous place for children. We know all of the expert advice is that sending children back there will only damage them further. In fact, sending children back to Nauru is child abuse, and I don't say that lightly. It is child abuse, and the question for Malcolm Turnbull as the Prime Minister today is, will he authorise it? We've heard from Peter Dutton that he wants to send all of the people, including these children, including young babies, to Nauru if the court case fails today. Malcolm Turnbull has to step up and clarify, does he agree that children deserve this abusive environment, or will he do the right thing?
OK, so you're arguing the children shouldn't be sent back, but what about the adult asylum seekers?
Well, in fact, all of the adults, it's really important to note here, all of the adults that are here on the mainland are here because they've suffered trauma and medical issues as a result of being in the island prison. Young women who were subjected to abuse and assault. One young woman who was raped on the island, and after 3 months of not getting the appropriate care was finally transferred to Australia. She does not deserve to be sent back there. And really what this shows, Michael, is just how sadly the situation has become with Nauru. It is not something that can be sustained in the long term, but for the people who are already here, the worst thing we can possibly do is to send them back to that hell.
Peter Dutton was again making the point this morning that there were 2,000 children in detention under former governments. There are now 80 children. He was making the point again that the government's tough approach, the Stop the Boats policy, has stopped men, women and children drowning at sea.
Well, you know, I find it just morally bankrupt for the minister to argue that a 5-year-old boy who has been raped deserves to be traumatised over and over again, so that they can say as a government that their election slogan has worked. And this child's life is worth much more than a 3-word slogan.
How confident are you of the strength of the case that we're about to hear the High Court's judgment on?
Well, I think it's going to be very difficult, to be absolutely frank with you, and that's because the government changed the laws in an attempt to thwart the case when it first came before the Parliament. Labor and the Liberal Party rammed through legislation to undermine it from day one. And then, of course, they've moved to say that the Nauru Centre is now open. Of course, where do you go on an island prison? Nowhere. Nauru is a prison in itself for these people. They're unsafe inside the camp, outside the camp, whether they're men, women or children. And honestly, if this is the only solution that the Labor Party and the Liberal Party think they can come up with in response to the humanitarian needs of people seeking asylum, well, it's time they started listening to the experts who say there's much more creative and humane ways of dealing with people who need our help.
OK, Senator, just before you go, as you know, one of the other stories this morning is our reports the government wants to fast-track those Senate voting reforms, which would make it much harder for independent candidates and smaller parties to win seats in the Senate. How do the Greens view that?
Look, we've obviously been looking at all of these options, and of course we want to ensure that the voters have the power to make the decisions about where their votes go. One of the biggest problems with these preference negotiations and the way the system currently works is that people don't necessarily know where their vote ends up. We do need more transparency around that. But of course, bullying people and trying to push particular senators in the parliament to vote for pieces of legislation only to then, if they don't, to threaten them losing their seat. I don't think that's an appropriate or mature way of managing government business.
Okay, Green Senator Sarah Hanson-Young, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.